Hey everyone, welcome back to the third installment of our Halloween anthology series, What If the Pokemon World Had a Zombie Apocalypse? If you haven't already seen the last part, it is on my channel and covers N's attempt to save Unova from the plague. Link in the iCard above.
Once again, special thanks to Plus Ultraman for designing and creating the art of the zombies. And don't forget to do the usual YouTube stuff, like subscribing, liking the video, and sharing it with friends.
But enough with us boring you to death. Let's get on with scaring you to death.
So sit back, relax if you can, and enjoy Chapter 3, Sanctuary.
Cyrus had never intended to be a savior, at least not for the masses. His goal had always been simple: escape this wretched world so steeped in emotion it radiates from every surface like a miasma, and create a new one, pure and clean. It seems fate had held other designs for him, starting all the way back on O-Day. He had been in a meeting with his inner circle of loyal admins when the news had been broken, a harried-looking grunt rushing into the boardroom to inform them of a disturbance in the street. In truth, Cyrus had cared little for this triviality, though being a savvy man, he had at least decided to survey the city from a high through one of the glass windows lining the room. Only one word could describe the sight that awaited Cyrus: pandemonium, as down below, people and Pokemon alike were tearing each other apart, while others fled in terrified confusion. Some might have been moved by this image, though Cyrus was not one of them, viewing such emotion with the same contempt and disdain one would have for the presumed sickness flooding the streets. Instead, he simply watched for hours, which stretched into days. All the while, his admins set about their work, recalling all the grunts present in Veilstone back to their fortified base, which would serve as their command center and bunker, while also reaching out to other Team Galactic facilities, such as their base in Eterna City, to ascertain how far the sickness had already spread. This early data gathering may have been what truly sealed Cyrus's grand destiny, as it allowed them to get ahead of the curve, with Charon quickly producing a model through which he could extrapolate the time frame and likely spread of this illness. The prognosis was not good, as logic would dictate that within a matter of weeks, all of Sinnoh would be overrun, and while someone more soft-hearted might have taken this to mean they had limited time to ride out and save everyone, or else find a cure, cold, pragmatic Cyrus saw only the fact that their window to fortify the city, as he had done with the base, was rapidly closing. However, such an undertaking could not be completed by Team Galactic alone, and so, donning his public persona, Cyrus had reached out to those who had been able to survive the initial outbreak. In doing so, he had hoped to find strong allies, though here he was disappointed, as thanks to the intervention of the gym leader Maylene, many who otherwise should have perished had been saved, and would therefore need to be accommodated for. Nonetheless, that would be a problem for another day, as the first order of business was to expel the infected from the city, a simple enough task thanks to the addition of Cyrus's forces, all of whom were healthy, rested, and ready to battle, a stark contrast from Maylene's ragged band of survivors.
In their shining silver attire, they had appeared like holy knights, marching forth from the galactic building and using their Pokemon to clear the streets of danger, a fact the people of Veilstone would not soon forget. However, this was not the only good done by Team Galactic, as on the order of their leader, they immediately began the process of fortification by building walls around the city and manning them with patrols courtesy of Cyrus's private army, while also using the strides they had made via their cover as a researcher of clean energy to keep the power on, allowing for a quality of life similar to before the outbreak. Recognizing the Galactic boss for the savior he was, it came as little surprise that when electing leaders for this new Veilstone colony, Cyrus's name was a top contender, with it ultimately being decided that he and Maylene would rule in tandem, dividing the power between them evenly to avoid corruption. However, Cyrus did not see it that way, as in his eyes, Maylene was already corrupted with the scourge of emotion, a lethal illness which would hold her and this city back, as her heart would invariably forbid her from taking some necessary step, and in doing so damn them all. Fortunately, this would not be a long-lasting problem, as about a month after this arrangement had been put in place, Maylene fell ill, exhibiting all the symptoms of the plague, with it falling to Cyrus to, reluctantly, give the order to have her banished outside their walls, since he knew his friend and trusted colleague would want to be held to the same standard as anyone else. Understanding this was for the good of everyone, the order was carried out without question, with Maylene soon turning and joining the horde of infected scrabbling against their gate. Though one question did remain: how had she gotten sick when everyone was so stringent about keeping the plague out? Now at last Cyrus had the control he needed, a gift he would not squander, with him promptly appointing his admins to occupy Maeline's vacant spot on the ruling council, as well as assigning them each a vital role. Mars, while rabidly loyal, had always been a blunt instrument, with her assignment reflecting this. She was to be the captain of the garrison, organizing the patrols along the wall, as well as overseeing the training of new Team Galactic grunts, of which there were many, as more and more people flocked to Cyrus's banner, seeing him as their heroic protector. Amusingly, Mars would quickly come to be perceived in a similar manner, as having no patience for incompetence, the people of Velston would often see her carrying out the patrols herself, all the while lambasting some poor grunt, thus earning her the reputation as their fiery guardian angel. Not that anyone would dare call that to her face, for fear of what she might do to them. As for Jupiter, she was given an assignment which served as the other half to Mars's role, oddly enough making the two longtime rivals indispensable to one another, as her job was to lead the Survey Corps, whose function was to go out into the ravaged wilds of Sinnoh, scavenging for resources and seeking out any neighbouring settlements that might have survived the fall. Though highly dangerous, this task suited Jupiter perfectly, as she was just as cold-blooded as Mars was hot, using her keen intellect to lead several successful expeditions, gathering both essential items for survival, as well as key knowledge, such as the fact that the infected hunt mostly through smell. Thankfully, her partner Skuntank had proved quite useful in that regard, as by making the exploratory teams reek of death and illness, they could pass freely through the lost territory without threat of attack or conversion.
Speaking of conversation, this was Saturn's job. As being the possessor of a silver tongue, he would walk among the people as the voice of Cyrus, while slowly raising his esteem in the eyes of the people of Veilstone, turning him from a mere leader into something more akin to a god. However, this was not Saturn's only function, as the one who speaks would do well to also listen, with it falling to him to root out any dissent among the populace and ensure that they would be the ones to suffer a mishap when training with Mars, or perhaps be lost while exploring with Jupiter, or else simply enter the galactic building and never come out. Together, these three admins quickly became the pillars which held up Veilstone, allowing the community to remain intact, with them all coming together under Cyrus's banner and believing that he would lead them to a better tomorrow, so long as they kept the faith and put their trust in him, with many growing so devoted that they adopted the identity of Cyrus onto themselves, figuring it would give them some sort of supernatural protection. However, Team Galactic does in fact have a fourth admin, one whose role is far less public-facing, that being Sharon. As the head of the R&D of Team Galactic, he had been instructed to begin conducting experiments on any infected they could acquire, be they human or Pokémon. And while officially the function of these experiments was to find a cure, through his work, Sharon learned far more. Things Cyrus was sure no one else studying this plague would have found, since, unlike his people, they would be constricted by their so-called ethics. Yet another symptom of the sickness that is emotion. Undeniably, the most valuable thing Sharon discovered about the virus is its nature, learning that it is seemingly a mutation of Pokyrus, sharing traits with both a conventional virus infection and a computer virus, that when it is contracted, it alters its subjects on both a genetic and neurological level. This had explained why Pokemon seemingly developed faster symptoms, as due to their ability to be converted into data and back again, they are vulnerable on two fronts, where humans only have to worry about the biological component of this bug. Beyond this, Sharon had been able to confirm several things which up to this point had only been speculation, such as the fact that the primary transmission is through fluid, though anything that can target the brain such as toxins or even psychic attacks could theoretically be used to spread the plague. Furthermore, it seems no Pokemon type or type combination is fully immune, since even if their body would not be capable of infection, such as in the case of most steel or ghost types, the part of the illness that affects data would still get them in the end. The only question is, where did it come from, since diseases do not spring up out of thin air, and such a massive divergence from a regular strain of Pokyrus would require a stimulus to trigger its mutation. Were Chiron truly trying to find a cure, answering this question would have been a central focus to his work, though in truth, his studies had a far more sinister purpose, discovering a means of controlling the infected, as while scouting south, Juniper had discovered the plague-ridden husk of Azelf rampaging through the remains of Lake Valor. Despite his new role as a savior, Cyrus had not forgotten his primary objective, and so had ordered his scouts to apprehend it and bring it back to HQ, with Juniper's team sacrificing a third of its ranks to bait it into a trap, where they were able to freeze it solid, while also using an array of psionic attacks to dampen its considerable psychic power.
Even this had not been enough to truly quell the beast, with it fighting them every step of the way back to Veilstone. Though, just when it had seemed as though the mission would end in failure, with Azelf escaping, it fell dormant, as if something had suddenly nullified its frenzy. Wanting to report this discovery directly to her boss, Jupiter had summoned Cyrus personally, with the savior of Veilstone coming quickly to examine this alien phenomenon, with Charon by his side. This had been the first time in weeks that Cyrus had left his headquarters, though as he would soon learn, it was well worth the trip, with Charon quickly identifying the source of Azelf's dormancy to be none other than the meteorites nestled just inside the southern gate. This revelation had caused Cyrus to do something none alive had ever seen him do before: laugh, with him quickly ordering that the meteorites be taken and studied, clearly having some idea of the correlation between legend and space stone, even if it was not obvious to mere mortals. And it was only when they were back at base that Cyrus deigned to reveal his hypothesis, that the key to saving this wretched world was the very same object he would need to free himself from it: the Red Chain. He had then explained that one of the primary reasons he had decided to build his base here was to eventually claim possession of the meteorites, as according to his studies, they were the primary component required to create a binding which would bend first the Lake Guardians and then the deities of time and space to his will. However, to forge such a chain would take time, with several more months passing before Charon could present his leader with the object of his desire. Nonetheless, under the rule of Cyrus, this time was not wasted, with Mars's garrison refortifying the southern wall, which had suddenly come under more attack after the meteorites were taken, strengthening the theory of the Red Chain's capacity to control the afflicted, while Jupiter's scouts had at last made it to Pastoria and Sunny Shore cities, finding both to be devoid of any sign of life, with their only inhabitants being the shambling sick. Were Cyrus the type to grieve, he might have been saddened to hear of Sunny Shore's fall, as that had been where his grandparents lived, though in truth, all he felt at the news was the faint satisfaction of knowing that his tenure as ruler had been far more successful than those who bore the corrupting influence of emotion. Finally, the fated day arrived, when Charon publicly presented Cyrus with a red chain, demonstrating how it not only pacified Azelf, but also made it compliant, while down below, the people cheered for their hero, likening this turning point to the invention of the Pokeball, and muttering excitedly at what glorious uses Cyrus might put the red chain to. However, none could have guessed what the blue-haired man would say as he stepped up to the podium, with him declaring that now at last, they had the tools they needed to reclaim Sinnoh, and perhaps even the entire world. Driven into a fervor by this inspiring statement, it came as little surprise when every able-bodied man, woman, and child signed up for the next expedition, with the plan being to divide into three forces. The first two under the command of Jupiter and Mars, heading north and south respectively, to attempt to tame the remaining Lake Guardians, while the third, led by Cyrus himself, would make the harrowing trek up Mount Coronet, where they would establish a base camp and await the return of the other divisions.
And this is where we find Cyrus, as he finally enters Spear Pillar, Azelf and Saturn by his side, and a train of devoted followers at his heels. At last, everything he desires in the palm of his hand. Though the climb had been arduous, no infected had bothered them, as the might of Azelf, bound in its red collar, had dealt with any who were not deterred by the seemingly mythical power of the Red Chain itself. And so now all that is left is to wait for Mars and Jupiter to complete their missions. Due to having the largest force, as everyone had wanted to follow their savior, Cyrus's journey, while the shortest, had taken far longer than it needed to, with it only taking 3 more days for his subordinates to return from their far reaches of Sinnoh, bringing with both Uxie and Mesprit, each as submissive as their blue-hued counterpart. Only when they are united does Cyrus reveal his plan to summon the deities of space and time, Dialga and Palkia, and put them to use, righting a terrible wrong that has existed for far too long. Naturally, the masses assume that Cyrus means to move all of the infected to a point in space where they cannot hurt anyone anymore, or else turn back time to before the disease came into existence, unable to conceive a world in which their hero would act of malicious intent. Though, to their great horror, when Cyrus begins his summoning, he asks only for one thing: a new world free of the sickness called emotion. At once, love sours into hate as the people of Veilstone realize that they have been used and betrayed. Cyrus is no savior. He is nothing but a false idol, only caring about himself. Riled up by this rage, those who still possess Pokemon bring them out to attack their former leader. Though before they can draw near, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn rise to defend their boss, with Purugly, Skuntank, and Toxicroak clashing with the Horde. Being trained for battle, unlike the civilian group, who are mostly pets and worker Pokemon, it is little challenge for the three to hold off the Horde, though it is not their attacks that Cyrus should be afraid of, but rather their anger, as with so much resentment coalescing in a place where the boundaries of reality have been loosened significantly, it is only natural that a different deity from the ones Cyrus had planned makes its appearance. Giratina. Manifesting as a vast shadow with glowing red eyes, the renegade Pokemon launches itself at Cyrus as the source of all this anger and hatred. And while he does attempt to use the power of the red chain to bind it just as he had the Lake Guardians, it is to no avail, with Giratina washing over the galactic boss like a wave before both vanish, leaving no sign that they were ever here to begin with. A short while later, or perhaps an eternity, it's hard to say, in a place with no time, Cyrus finds himself alone, staring out in the vast, empty void. Briefly, he contemplates how this must be the domain of Giratina, the place called the Distortion World, or else the Reverse World. Though, in truth, he hardly cares, as though it was not what he intended, it is still exactly what he desires, a world free of emotion. Now, all that is left to do is carve himself out a life in this beautiful barren void, a prospect he finds most enticing, though before he can take a single step into this place of his dreams, a shadow falls over him, and as he turns his gaze skyward, or at least what passes for sky in a world devoid of space, he sees Giratina soaring overhead. While this would normally not trouble him, there is something to its eyes that makes his blood run cold. They are milky, just like them. No. No!
And that's where we'll leave things for now, though we still have one more story to tell, set in this zombie-ravaged Pokemon world.
The season finale will be on my channel, premiering at 12 AM PST on Halloween, which is 7 PM AEST for our Australian viewing audience. So be sure to check it out, and while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to me and Pickled Dill.
But with that said, we'll catch you when the journey continues.
And remember, beware of what goes bump in the night.